Hey everybody, welcome to Infinite Impact Radio. We are here with Morgane Roos Carreira. Did I pronounce it correctly
Right.
again? We've tried again. We had technical difficulties, just to let everybody know, so it might be, we're sort of laughing a little bit. So I switched to my other AirPods, whatever they're called. So we're moving forward. So I'm excited to have you. Thank you for joining us. I know it's late over on your side of the world. So it's, I appreciate you taking the time for coming on. So just a little bit of quick backstory. Morgane and I ran into each other when online. I just interviewed somebody and you reached out to me when you saw that they'd been on my podcast and we started a conversation, and I went online and I started doing like everybody does, started exploring people's profiles, looking into what they're doing. I knew you were a podcaster, and I started looking at your story of behind your podcast, and I was like, I've got to get you on our podcast. So I'm really excited that you're here. So if you don't mind, just sort of jump in and tell us a little bit about your backstory, about, as far back as you want to go, as deep as you want to take it, but just a little bit about, who you are and where you came from and how you got started.
All right. So my name is Morgane Roos Carreira, as you said. Very well. I'm French, hence the accent. And I came to the UK 9 years ago. So now I live in London. And I am a single mom of a little daughter. She's almost 5 years old. And so I was supposed to stay in London for 9 months, and I stayed for 9 years.
Wow.
Because of love. But sadly, I'm not with the dad anymore. So here I am. And when I came to London, I didn't come here as a manager, but I was working in hospitality. So I was working in restaurants and bars and pubs. And when I fell pregnant, everything was going to be okay, because we had like a whole long discussion before having a child. But when I ended up being a single mom, I realized that my lifestyle, my professional lifestyle, was not going to work with motherhood. And I was almost turning 30. I was really close to being 30. And I was like, I don't know what to do, but I've always wanted to study journalism. And I was like, I'm here without any family. I have only my daughter, and I need to show her that everything is possible at any point of your life. And so I just did it. I enrolled at university, and this year in July I graduated. And
Congratulations.
Thank you. And so that's my backstory, actually. And this is how, I was like, what do I want to do with this degree now? And I met someone going on holiday. You see, like the joy of meeting random people. And I met someone on holiday, and he asked me, but what do you want to do really? And I told him, I love videos and I love broadcasting. I love meeting people, hearing their stories. He was like, why don't you do it? And I was like, okay, I'm going to launch my own podcast. And yeah, now it was in July, and I launched my podcast. So here we go.
That's great. I mean, I love both. Just the fact that I love that advice. So I hope everybody that is listening, such easy, but I mean, simple advice that person provided you, but it was also life-changing advice. Just what do you want to do? Just do it.
Yeah.
And
what do you want? Yeah. That's not the question people ask, especially they ask you, what are you going to do, or what do they want you to do? But they don't really ask you, but have you thought about yourself, and tell me right now, what do you love to do and what do you want to do? And I was having a mojito, I was not like really deeply in conversation. No, I was having fun, and So it was really like a light thought, and it just came like that. And I know that I would love to work for myself, and I would love to do something that I'm passionate about. And I wake up in the morning, or I go super late at night in bed, but I don't complain because I love what I'm doing. And I know that doing the podcast is exactly the lifestyle I'm hoping. So
Yeah, that's great. I actually had another guest that came on, and we were discussing something similar. And she said that as soon as that the way you described it, where you said, you were just relaxed, it wasn't a deep thought where you sat there and started thinking and contemplating what you wanted to work or what you wanted to do. You just let the inspiration came to the surface and came out. And she was telling me, she's like, if you stop and think and let the voices in your head start to answer for you, then it'll probably be the thing that you don't want to do. So I think that your process was perfect. It was amazing that that's the way it worked out. So I love that. And then another theme that I will share too with our listeners, that if they've been listening to all the podcasts, the same theme, it's not what others want you to do, not what you should do. We've had other people have come on and they've been, I followed the life that I was supposed to. My parents did this. I was supposed to go to college. I was supposed to be an accountant when I wanted to be this instead. And there was another one who was like, I went to school. My parents were doctors. I was supposed to grow up, do the same thing. So it's almost that what you brought up is perfect. I love that. Not what should you do, not what others want you to do, but just sort of sit and let the inspiration come out. Let yourself feel it. And if you feel it and you feel fired up about it, then you've probably doing the right thing. So I love that. So that's a great backstory. But what I'd like to sort of move into, because I know that when you and I discussed over messages and I went onto your website and looked, I noticed that there was a certain type of person you wanted to sort of talk about in your podcast. You're very like talking about people's superpowers, but there was a certain avatar, a certain person that you wanted to bring to the forefront to sort of share to your audience. So if you don't mind, if you would just sort of give us a little bit of info on that and why you chose to sort of shine that person's light, or that type of person, it's not necessarily a person, out to everybody that's listening.
So actually at the beginning, I wasn't sure. When I started the podcast, I wasn't sure that I wanted to have a special niche. It was just about, people, how they change their lives and they follow their dreams, But after interviewing, I think it was like maybe 5 women, I started realizing that I was actually looking for women every time I was looking for a subject, or when I was interviewing someone and they were like, oh, you should interview this person. It was always this kind of niche of women, and very strong women. And I think, I'm a single mom, as I said, and I've got a daughter, and I've always raised her in this really strong, independent woman atmosphere. And not that I'm a feminist, but and I think it's really important. Nothing is wrong with feminists, but I don't.
Right.
I think it's I think it's very important to put women out there, because I think still nowadays it's really hard for us to have confidence and to feel important, and that what we do is important and we can change the rules and stuff like that. And it's actually after one of my interviews about feminism, actually, and I was like, yeah, there is so much still to change. And so yeah, I decided to interview women about their way of living. That's the name of my podcast, the Way of Living podcast. So usually they change their lives. That can be career, or having a child, or anything, or having a new hobby. Like I had someone who decided to start dancing full time, or a mom who had a son who is different. So it can be anything, but they completely changed their lives and they followed their dreams. So that's my niche now.
Yeah, I love that. No, I love that. And but I don't know if you realize this, but in a lot of ways, you're describing yourself. The
I'm
way that,
starting to realize it now. Yes, the more I
yeah, I
talk
mean,
about it.
yeah, this person, I mean, coming from somebody who's just now met you for the first time, and I'm hearing your story and then the story of the people you want to share. And I can relate to that in a lot of ways, because I started realizing that this podcast, where I am wanting to introduce people who are other entrepreneurs, people that I'm meeting that have life-changing missions, that they want to change the world in a positive way. In some way, it's almost like I'm telling my story a little bit through their stories. So it's I see it with you too as well. I recognize that similarity. So I want to talk about something else we discussed before we came on here, because you actually asked me, how do you find guests for your podcast? And I was telling you how sometimes when you put, at least in my case, when I put it out to the universe, to the world, to the spirit, to whatever you want to call it, that I was doing this, that I claimed it, that I was going to do it, and I started reaching out to people, all of a sudden it was like the right people started showing up for me in my life to be on my podcast. So I'm curious, because I just wanted to ask, is it something similar with you as well? Because it sounds like you were meeting the right type of people that fit perfectly for your podcast.
Well, I think everyone is interesting. Everyone has a very interesting story, you know. And as I said earlier, I realized that I actually surrounded myself and my daughter with very strong, independent women. And, you know, even my Instagram, I follow strong, independent moms and women, mom entrepreneurs and stuff like that. So when I started doing the podcast, I had already a list in my notebook of people that I wanted to interview. Some said no, some said yes, but I started with my friends, you know, as you said earlier to me, off camera, well, off a live thing, you know, you start interviewing friends. And this is what happened with me. And, you know, as soon as you start talking about projects, you know, people know other people who know other people. You know, I have a friend who got me in touch with one of her friends, and this friend got me in touch with two of her friends. I think you need to have the confidence to ask people to help you with the podcast as well. I asked to interview one of my manager from a magazine I worked on. I asked I'm a fan of someone on Instagram. She's a mom, and I interviewed her. You know,
That's
I
great.
I think you just get. As soon as you start talking to people, you get used to it. You know, ask kind of the same questions, how to you present your podcast or your business, and so because you're confident, people are not scared, and they're not like, "What do you want from me exactly?" Because
Right.
you know what you want from them and you're telling them. And so this is how I get people so far. I'm a bit nervous all the time because I'm like, oh my God, I'm crossing the last person on my list. Who am I going to interview? But you always get to know other people. And when your list is all crossed over, is it a word?
Yeah.
Well, you actually do the work to meet new people, you know. So there's always someone with an incredible story. You just need to know something about them and you expand it, you know, because some people are like, I'm not interesting. I think I'm not really interesting, but if you think about it, of course I am interesting. Everyone is, you know.
Yes.
And everyone has something to share to inspire others. You know, I have so much to learn from you, and you probably have so much to learn from me, for example, you know, even in 5 minutes.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's really important that people understand that their story is going to inspire somebody.
Yeah,
And it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be somebody who's got a room of, 10,000 people jumping and cheering in front of you. That person would probably be just as happy if one person in that audience was inspired by their message, just as somebody who has a story, because everybody, it's the same thing that I've found. I mean, it's exactly what you say. Everybody has something that connects with somebody else, and it may be just one sentence, one idea that they say that changes somebody's lives for the
yeah,
better. So that's what I really like about interviewing people like yourself and getting to know people and their stories, because I think
yeah,
my whole thought is, all it takes is one, like your one story, you throw it into that pond and it creates ripples that affect
mm,
everybody. So, I mean, single moms who just want to become entrepreneurs like yourself, people that want to follow their dreams, they're all inspired by your story. Yeah, so I think it's important. I think that it's nice that you recognize that in other people too, as well, because a lot of times I haven't run across that yet, because most people I reach out to, or I know that they've got a good story and they're already online doing it. But there's people on my list that I'm going to have to use that approach possibly that you just mentioned, because they are not on the online world. They're not really people that are putting themselves out there, but I know they're such an inspirational person that I still want to talk to them. So
yeah.
I'm going
And
to
you
take that
should.
little, yeah, I'm going to take that tidbit from you. I'm going to be like, give them that pep talk, like your story is interesting. So I'm going to use that. So see, I did learn something from you today. So you were right,
That's great.
100%. Um, so here's one thing I wanted to bring up. I saw this on your website, and it sort of falls almost into what you just talked about a little bit, but you mentioned success.
Oh yeah.
And the reason that I'm bringing that up, well, there's multiple reasons. I loved your take on it, but this is something that I just had a conversation with somebody about literally like 2 hours. Well, yeah, about 2 to 3 hours ago. The same exact, his words coming out of his mouth were almost similar to what you were talking about. So I was just like, okay, I got to bring this up because somebody's telling me somebody needs to hear this message, because it's twice now I've had it. Maybe it's me that needs to hear it, because I've had two people now that really discuss this. So without me continuing to ramble, as I told you I would if I wasn't careful, I'd love to hear about it. So success. How do you
So
define success?
So success. I don't know exactly what I wrote on the website, but I usually always say the same. So tell me if I didn't say the right thing. Um,
Okay.
I think success is a very broad word, and success is not the same for everyone. You know, and I actually wrote this thing on the website after I interviewed someone about for my podcast. And when I asked her about, because I always ask the same question at the end, like, do you feel successful, or how successful are you? And this person said, well, I'm happy. I'm just happy. So yeah. And I think that just said, I knew this in the back of my mind that, yeah, you can be successful just being happy. But I think it was worth writing it down, because personally, when I think about success, it's professionally. Do I have enough money in the bank account? Do I have a job worth just showing off? And I think it's not true, because success is an ongoing thing. Because sometimes you're successful at doing for the first time a risotto. Wow, that's success. Now to the next
Right.
success. I know that, for example, I've been successful at doing a degree just before my 30th birthday. I'm successful at being a great role for my daughter. But I want to be successful at doing my podcast. I want to be successful at traveling more. I want to be successful at writing better and talking English better. So it's an ongoing thing. And it's not just a checking box, oh, I check, I don't want, it's a very broad word. And to each people have their own success idea and goals, I think.
Yeah, that sums it up perfectly. I mean, that's perfect, because that's exactly what we were talking about today. We were talking about how comparison, we live in a world where we can, like, I can see you on Instagram, I can see you I can watch you on, Facebook, or not just you necessarily, but we see people, and we see people posting these things and sharing these things, and the world is telling us, like you said, success is having this, but success is like, it's a personal thing. It's your thing, your version of success. Like what you said, it's like, that's what makes you happy. That's how you're going to feel successful. So I think it's important that people hear that message, so they can stop thinking that I have to. It goes back to just like what you were talking about, how you chose in that moment when you're on holiday. Instead of saying vacation, I actually said holiday. When you're on holiday, and you answered that question, when they asked you, what do you want to do? It wasn't the version of society's what you should do. And it wasn't, it's not the society's decision to tell you what successful is. It's what you take on as successful. And, and I'll just share a story. I don't like to talk about myself on here, but I'll share one thing that's just a tiny success. When I was on a Facebook Live last night, I was tired. It'd been a rough day. I just had all these things coming at me, and trying to, like I told somebody, it was like they were trying to knock me off of a log into the water or something. And at the end of the day, I was a little tired, and I had this Facebook Live. And when it ended, I was in somebody else's Facebook group sharing things about podcasting and how to grow and make money from a podcast. And one person left a comment that said, you were exactly who I needed to hear from tonight. I've been wanting to start a podcast, but I'd lost all my motivation. And by hearing you tonight, I've got the motivation. I'm starting tomorrow. And I just was like, okay, my day has been successful. That was it.
Great. Yes, exactly.
And that's what I love about it, because then I woke up today, had that conversation with somebody who was talking about success being a personal thing. And then when I saw it on your website, and then hearing it from your words, I'm like, this is an important message that needs to get out, because it's happening left and right. So I'm glad that we could share it with everybody, because I think it's important in this time and age today that we're in, with social media and comparing yourself with this person or that person, and I will say this too, with I'm sure you get this a lot, and you can tell me if I'm wrong or not. I mean, I am male, but I see single moms, and moms are probably you're expected to raise your child a certain way. You're expected to do certain, society is putting that on you. So I think what you're doing and bringing out your superpower and sharing other women's superpowers is just, it's a wonderful thing. So I'm so glad that we connected, and I'm glad you've been on here. So I look at it, and I'll show you real quick. I don't know if you can see that or not, but that's my mom. So moms have a special place in my heart, so as well, and my wife as well, with our daughter, who is 8. So the last thing I want to talk about, then we'll jump off, but I wanted to just sort of talk about serving others. So it sounds to me like from your podcast, you really want to share and serve others messages to help them get out. So was that something that you thought about, or is it just something that was sort of in you that came out when you made the decision to be an entrepreneur and podcast on your own? Or how did that sort of serve first part of your life come out?
So what do you mean, like serving, like helping people?
Yes, like a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of people, in the entrepreneurial world, we get a bad rap, because a lot of them are like, hey, look at my fancy car, I'm out to make, a lot of money. But from looking at your, from your message, your podcast, your mission is to serve others and put them first, contribute to their stories and their lives. So I was just curious if that was something that, how that came about, because it's not rare, but it's also not the norm in entrepreneurial society.
Yeah, so yeah, it was thought about because when I was drinking this mojito on holidays, this is what came through my mind. I think I love talking to people. I don't love talking about myself to people. I just love talking to them and hearing their stories. And I know that because of my childhood and a lot of things, I don't have a lot of confidence. And when I hear some other people's stories, sometimes I'm like, oh, wait, I can do this. Oh, that gives me an idea because I'm good at this too. And like, actually, yesterday I was talking to this amazing woman. We spent the whole day together, and this is the last 15 minutes that I actually really got to know her. And when she was telling me a few tips and a few things from her past or what she's done, and I was like, oh, wait, I'm actually not shit. I'm actually good at this too, and I could do this too. And so that's what my podcast is all about. Influence people and inspire them because you're good at this too. If you want to do it, do it. And here is a little tip from this mom who's making backpacks, or this person who has a different child. So my podcast is not me talking. Well, actually, I'm going to actually have one where it's just me talking, but I'm really scared about publishing it. But my podcast is interviewing people and them giving us tips about how they did it and how to do it and how they found the confidence and everything. So this is just interviewing them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's sort of shining the light on them and serving your audience through them, which,
Yeah.
I love. Okay, well, we're going to wrap it up because we've covered a lot of stuff and I appreciate it. And I know it's nighttime there and your daughter's asleep and I don't want to, it was funny because earlier I was like, I better be quiet, but I'm like, wait a minute, I'm not there. I'm not her. I'm so used to having a young child around, a daughter myself, that it's like, okay, I got to lower my voice a little. But if you would just go ahead and tell everybody the name of your podcast again and where they can find it, and maybe where they can find out more about you, whether it's on Instagram or your website or wherever.
So the easiest way is to follow me on Instagram. So it's way_of_living_podcast. So it's just way of living, but with the underscore. So I talk a lot about me, or about what I'm doing and all the interviews I'm doing and everything. So you can just keep in touch, and you can talk to me and stuff there. And and I have all the links for my websites and for the audio podcast and videos as well on Instagram. So I think that's the best way.
Okay, perfect. And what I'll do is I'll go on and put the information too in the show notes so they can just see it there and click on it and go straight over to Instagram. And it is easy. Like that's how, when I wanted to find out more about you and what you were doing, I actually went to Instagram, just like you said, clicked on your link and it opened up more links and I was able to find out everything I need. So that's the perfect place to start. So it's way_of_living_podcast.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Makes sense. All right. Well, I appreciate once again, just grateful that you were shared your story with us and come on. And I look forward to checking out your podcast and listening to it a little bit as well. And I appreciate what you're doing, because as someone who has a daughter, obviously I'm not a single mom, but I am a father who really wants his daughter to grow up empowered and know that she can do anything in the world. And that's one reason I'm doing this podcast as well, is to show her people like you and others that come on and like, look, you can be like this. You can live your dream. You can follow your dream. You can serve others while still making a good living and making an impact on the world. And I think too, what you're doing is making the world better. So I appreciate you for that, because when my daughter gets older, the world will be a better place because of what you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And thank you again for your time. I appreciate you. And we're going to log off now before I ramble for the next hour. So everybody, thank you for listening. Thank you for listening and being with us on Infinite Impact Radio and Infinite Impact TV. And check out all the show notes. Make sure to follow Morgane, correct?
Yep.
And we appreciate everybody watching and listening.
Thank you.